Hi, everybody. How's everyone doing? Come on, it's the last panel of the night. A little more. So, my name is Jeremy Atkins. I'm the Director of Public Relations at Dark Horse. I'm going to let these lovely folks to my right introduce themselves.
Yes, I'm Christos, Gage, writer of Angel and Faith.
I'm Jane Espenson. I was one of the writers on the show, and this year I introduced along with Drew Greenberg, I introduced the Billy character.
Hi, Jeanty. I'm the artist on Buffy season 8 and 9. Andrew Chambliss, the writer of Buffy this season.
All right, so we've got some artwork that I'm going to kind of scroll through as we talk a little bit here. But I'm going to go ahead and we're going to start with both Chris and Andrew. I want to talk a little bit about, this is the first time that we've done two books running side by side. How was it kind of working together along with Scott Alley and everyone else to sort of figure out the ways to make these two books work together at the same time, crossover?
Well, Scott has been really good, and Sierra and Freddie, the editors, at making sure everything lines up, at least on my end. And then Andrew and I, we email. We're both in LA, so
Yeah, we email a lot, and occasionally we'll do conference calls where it'll be Scott, me, and Sierra, and Christos, and we'll talk about everything from Vampire rules to making sure that the final arcs are going to kind of match up and each kind of complement each other.
It's been so cool when like a character is like, I'm leaving the room in this one to go to help other people, and then you see them show up in your book, and it's like that.
It's like it was playing.
It's like.
But the amazing thing is that the books come out when they're supposed to. Angel of Faith comes out the last week, Wednesday of every month, and yours comes out 2 weeks.
Yeah, after that. And then,
after that.
So, because we have had a couple instances where characters have left your book, showed up in mine, vice versa, and luckily the timing has always worked out on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, and Scott's been great in keeping us on track and making sure we're all talking to each other.
And who else has been great is the artists who actually have the tougher job of getting the work done.
Yes, that's true.
Make sure it comes out on time. So kudos to Rebecca, who's not here, and I don't know who the other one is who directs it. Somebody does it, unless they have a machine doing it now.
Bite your tongue.
So how many of you guys have been reading all the comics? So for anyone who hasn't, if maybe you guys could give us sort of a little idea of where we're at now in season 9.
Well, in Angel and Faith, spoiler alert, at the end of season 8, Angel, under the influence of Twilight, killed Giles. So in season 9, he is, his big thing is he wants to resurrect Giles, despite the fact that you can't resurrect someone from a natural death and there's no magic anymore. So it's been a little tricky, bumpy road, and Faith at first wasn't into it. She was mentoring a group of Slayers, but then she kind of got invested in it along the way. One of the things that's been fun to explore is how Faith as a character, who I think has grown more than any of the other characters, but still always had this thing about wanting a father figure because she never had a real one. And she realized that Giles was the best one she ever had, and it was for so short a time. So now she's equally invested. And so, by the way, I promise that it won't be the very last issue of the season when you find out if they succeed or fail in resurrecting Giles. It'll happen sooner than that. In the meantime, the end of Magic has kind of driven Whistler, you guys remember Whistler from the show, he's a balance demon, and there's no balance anymore because there's no more magic, so he's gone a little wacky, and he wants to bring magic back to the earth by essentially releasing a magic plague that will infect everybody and make them part magic, except it'll kill about 2 billion people. It's a small detail. So our guys are trying to stop that from happening as well.
And then, with Buffy, she spent a lot of the season kind of coming to terms with what she did to the seed, and she's watched kind of all of her friends go off and figure things out for themselves, as well as gone off, had her own miniseries, kind of comes to terms with her magic, what that means for her. Xander and Dawn have been living their life, and just when Buffy kind of got to the place of being okay with what she did, she realized that destroying the seed actually had consequences for her in the most personal way possible. Dawn, who was the key and was made Buffy's sister and is magic, is starting to disappear because there is no more magic in the world. So it's all kind of come home for Buffy and hit her in an unexpected and super personal way. So she right now is kind of reeling with that, and is going to try to figure out how to fix what she's done.
Actually, a question for Georges. So obviously one of the biggest differences between season 8 and season 9 since you come on this book is the fact that we have had one writer for the most part throughout the majority of the issues, with the exception of the lovely Jane Espenson stepping in for a couple issues as well. Has there been a difference in the process for you in terms of working with just one writer and one kind of vision of Buffy versus various writers on season 8?
Well, I would assume the obvious would be you get to go to one person and you're always kind of talking to that one guy, and you do develop a language, which for the most part, because I think Jane and I, when we were doing season 8, we kind of developed a language going into it. And then with Joss and a couple of other writers. But Jane, I think, you came in for the most issues in season 8.
Did I?
Coming in.
Oh, maybe.
I think you did 3 or 4.
Oh, yeah. Well, that sounds like a lot of work.
So yeah, I think you do develop a relationship, or actually I think an artist should develop a relationship with their writers, however brief it might be, because, and again, Jane and Andrew, I don't know if you can speak on this, but I assume you feel a little more comfortable when all those times I might have called you or said, hey, well, what about this, or what about that? And you just feel a little better, I think, as a writer, where your words are going to the artist who is obviously into, and I'm a Buffy fan, so I was nitpicking things, and Andrew can probably tell you. You say, hey, well, what about this? And, oh, well, Buffy can't do this because she did this back in so-and-so.
Oh, it's so helpful because it's so easy to lose track of things and make a mistake, and it felt like having you drawing. I knew it would look beautiful, and I knew that any time when I was stupid, you would catch it.
And I mean, it's also great too, because when you finish a script, I've been looking at it for weeks, and Scott and the editorial team has been all looking at it, and so when it goes to George's and he reads it, he's looking at it with fresh eyes, so a lot of times he can pipe in with like an idea here and here, and it's super helpful to have someone who's so close to it, but also can look at it a little bit more objectively than those of us who've been staring at a computer screen for weeks working on it.
So that's a great advantage, just to be able to have that go-between.
And actually, Jane, obviously, you've done quite a bit of work on Buffy from television now in comics. You're going to be bringing a new story out in Dark Horse Presents, correct?
Yeah, a little short Billy story, a little specific adventure coming up, and I'm really excited about it. I love that character, and it was great to go back and see what he's doing now that he's had some time in the Buffy family.
What can you tell us a little bit about it? No spoilers, please.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was gonna say it's called, and I'm like, oh, maybe the title's a spoiler. It's got both adventure aspects and relationship aspects. So it doesn't just hold Billy in without comment, but it doesn't make it all about his gayness. I think it's a lovely little tale.
One of the things that I know we've talked about this on panels before, but I'm sure I don't have to tell anyone up here except for maybe Jane, having been a part of the show when it was on television. Coming into this world could be a little intimidating because it turns out that Buffy fans are pretty devoted.
Yeah, it turns out.
So, for everyone up here, well, except for maybe Jane, because her answer's kind of obvious. Were you guys fans of the show before coming onto the comic? And if not, which would not go over well in this room at all, I'm just kidding. What was it like to come into something that did have such a rich history prior to you stepping into this role?
Well, for me, I had never seen Buffy or Angel before Scott Alley approached me, having read a graphic novel I wrote, and asked if I would be interested. And I knew Josh Stewart from Astonishing X-Men. We grew up reading the same era of X-Men, and to me, it was the best X-Men I had read since the Chris Claremont, John Byrne era when I was a kid. And I actually ended up sitting across from Joss on a train back to LA from San Diego one year, I think it was 2007, and I told him this, and we had a nice chat about comic, but I'd never seen any of his shows. So when I talked to Scott, I was like, I've been wanting to see these shows, so I'll just start watching them, and of course I got immediately sucked into it. It's like when I was, 10 years old and I read my first X-Men comic, and there had been 20 years of X-Men at that point, and I knew that there was this rich history, and instead of being like, oh my god, I can't possibly deal with all this, I was like, I want to find out all about this. And so I watched all the shows and just became a total fan, and now I'm a huge fan, and actually just recently watched Firefly, my wife and I, and I have the Dollhouse Season 1 DVD sitting, waiting for the right moment to be watched, and I love Dr. Horrible, and I also love Husbands, which is awesome.
Wow. Maybe after the... I was very fond of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's publicly known. I'd never watched the show Buffy before I'd gotten the job, and I was only really brought in because apparently Joss said, hey, I want to do this season 8, I want to carry it on, and he told to the editor, Scott Alley, and said, here, this is a list of people that I really would like to get. I don't know where I was on that particular list, but when I got the call, I was of course, honored, flabbergasted. I knew Buffy from pop culture, but not necessarily episode per episode. And a little known fact, I was only going to be around for those for Joss's first 4 issues. That's all I was going to do. And Scott Alley, rightly so, took me aside and said, no, trust me, this is bigger than you think right now. As soon as you meet those fans and as soon as you realize how rabid they are, you're going to want to stay on this. And true to his telling, I was flabbergasted and have not been off the book since. So it's going to be, we were talking about this, about 5 years now. 5-6 years once the season's over that I've been on this particular book, almost just as much as the show was on the air. So
oh, wow.
It's, I'm now a fan, wasn't a fan before, but I'm very much a fan.
Yeah, I was definitely a fan before. I worked with Joss on Dollhouse, and there were so many times in the room where between Joss and Tim Minear and Jane joined us, that they were talking to shorthand about Buffy and Angel. So I would always come home from work and rewatch stuff just so I could know what they were talking about and referring to, and became a fan all over again. And then when Joss approached me. It was one of those moments where I'm like, how can I say no? A chance to play in that playground that you were lucky enough to play in. Yeah, it was an awesome opportunity.
Jane helped build that playground.
Yes.
Well, I joined in season 3, so there was a whole lot of that jungle gym already built. So.
And actually, to that point, for you and Andrew, coming into writing comics, Jane, you've been doing this for a while now, but coming into writing comics versus writing television, what from what was about the spirit of the show and also just sort of, just television in general, did you want to bring to comic storytelling?
Oh, well, for the first part, it's a very different process, and it took me a long time to feel any sort of competency with writing comics because it's so visual and you have to be so precise. Like in TV, you can just write a page of dialogue and just, oh, well, the director and the actors know these roles and they'll come up with great blocking and the facial expressions will say it all and they'll find layers I'm not even thinking of. No, in comic books, you have to write what do you choose that snapshot to be? What are their faces doing? What exactly is this moment? And it's much, much harder. What I brought, so I was adding more than I was bringing. I was learning more than I was bringing. I guess what I brought is just like, I love dialogue, and I think comic books, because they are much more of a visual medium and they're less about the dialogue, I wanted to keep Joss, the way Joss had kept his respect for the characters still sounded like them, and he really paid attention and worked hard to find the funniest joke and all that stuff. I wanted to bring that. And I always like it when, you sort of refer to the actor. And so I sort of wanted to bring that in there, that unlike many comic books, this comic book comes with the audience knowing exactly what the actor looks like that played that role and what their physiology was and how their voice sounds and all sorts of things that you don't normally know, and to sort of reference that stuff and try to keep that sense of that there's a flesh and blood human being playing this part, try to keep that alive. So that's all I got.
A lot of what Jane said, but definitely writing a comic book script, there is so much more that you have to put on the page and so much more you have to think about. And so much of it, you're thinking about things in television, the director, the production designer, costumer, all these things that someone else would be, taking care of, that you would be, talking to them about. You're splitting that job with the artist and trying to give them the basis, so then George just can step in and decide the best way to draw something. And I mean, ultimately, I think George is the one who's the actor, and he's the one who's taking the dialogue and giving it life, because it is when you're writing dialogue for living, breathing actors, you can actually talk to them about the scene, and they have ideas of what they want to bring to it. And when you're just writing something that's going to be on the page, that's not necessarily the same, and you have to rely on the artist to bring a lot of that. So. It's a lot more work in between the writer and the artist. I think you're doing a lot of jobs on television to be spread out amongst a lot of people.
Yeah, I think with Jane, what you were saying, you're very dense as a writer coming into this comic medium as a TV writer or a screenwriter, and the scripts tended to be a little more dense because they're very description heavy. What I've found, and I don't know if that's to my credit or the credit of a good artist, a lot of the scripts have become a lot lighter. Like there's only one or two little descriptions I've noticed Andrew saying, oh, by the way, they're going to go down into the deeper well and they're going to do this and whatever, and that's it. And you're like, oh, okay, well now I got to think about that, and go into it. And obviously, if there are questions, you definitely go to the writer. But I think as you become more comfortable, you get that dialogue, like you were saying with Jane and everybody coming in a dollhouse. They have that shorthand already instituted there.
I think that comes with getting used to also a relationship with a creative team. I know that for me with Rebecca, I've gotten to where a lot of times will just go so shorthand that Scott will say, will you please just, remind her that this person is carrying an axe, because I'll get to like page 5 and I'll say, oh yeah, can you give Faith an axe somewhere on page 1, but I do also think that what I found interesting, having read different people's scripts for this series, like Josh being a director as well, when he writes for you, George, he will, say medium shot, 2 shot, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't do that because I'm not a director. I did actually, my wife and I wrote for Law & Order SVU, and that was a little bit different because on that show, when they shoot an episode of Law & Order, they literally, what's not on the soundstage, they'll block off an entire city block, and this set will be this location, and then up the block is another one. So you almost have to write it in such a way that a scene that takes place in a drugstore can be switched to a bodega, or you know what I mean, if that's what happens. It's much more, I think, dialogue dependent, and in comics, I always try to remember that it is a visual medium, and let's try to have something interesting happening on a page, not gratuitously, like let's have an explosion here in the background just for the hell of it, but what is the most interesting locale for this? Can they be, I do a lot of Angel and Faith talking on rooftops because it's cool, and because Rebecca went to London and took a lot of cool pictures that she can use as reference. So, I think that is an important thing to remember when going from one to the other, is in comics there are no limits, and you want to do some interesting visual stuff and take advantage of that.
Well, sometimes, and I know it's funny because Joss brought up an example that I later was talking to Brian K. Vaughan, who's another writer who wrote the Faith arc for season 8. We were sitting down and just sort of talking, oh, how cool is it to work with Joss? Oh yeah, it's super cool. And I'm like, but there was something I didn't get in one of his descriptions, and apparently this is more of a television writing. In one of the panel descriptions, he said, okay, I want a cowboy of these 2 guys, and they're doing this, this, and this. And Brian was like, yeah, what the hell is that? I don't know what that means. And apparently, I don't know, Jane, you can give it a more
frame that goes down and includes your hips where your guns would be.
Yeah, didn't know that at all. So I had to ask Joss, what's a cowboy? Are they wearing costumes?
You should go back and draw all those panels.
This is what you wanted, right?
It's blinding.
Western would be pretty bizarre. So actually stepping back a little bit from process and just sort of talking about the characters in this world, obviously, 6 p.m. panel on a Saturday night and every seat is full. What do you guys think it is about these characters in this world that has really sort of stood the test of time and has sort of not only continued to expand on the experience that existing fans had in watching the show, but new fans like yourselves and coming into these positions and writing and whatever, has brought people in and still been compelling, you know, in today?
I think it's the universality, the human universality that Joss brings to all his shows, all his characters, whether they are in the future in space, or in high school, in the present day, or the Hulk. You know, I think that it speaks to everyone. I think in 50 years or 100 years, when everyone's going to school on the internet, Buffy will still speak to people because of who the characters are. They live and breathe, and that's why people care about them so much. And I think you were saying something earlier, Jane, about how so many young men have come up to you and said how much the show meant to them.
Yeah, for a long time we would get letters, and you know, young women would come up to us, the writers, and I'm sure the actors too, and say, like, I only got through life, I only got through high school because of Buffy. And then suddenly it was all young men saying that and realizing they had identified with Buffy, and because the metaphor was always so clear, like, she's got this secret, she can't tell people who she really is, but she knows she's secretly awesome, and maybe someday I'll be allowed to blossom, but right now I kind of have to be scared and not let people know that I'm out slaying. And all those guys tapped into that metaphor and found strength in Buffy, and I think that is part of what you're talking about, the universality of the human experience, and the fact that the show had a reason to exist. This show had a message for young people that went beyond even what we realized it was saying, to tell people about, high school is hell, but you can get through.
Yeah. And I mean, I think like this is something that, like, Joss always would say, like on Dollhouse, and I'm sure he would say on Buffy, but he'd always ask, well, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? And if you didn't have an answer to that, you knew you were sunk, because you knew your pitch was just going to die. But even now, it's always asking, you know, you send him an email, talk about an arc in the comic book, and he's always just trying to reduce it. What does it mean? What's the reason we're telling this story? And I think he's always so careful about having a reason to tell a story that's why people, you know, connect to it so much, is because we're not just telling a story because it's cool or it's fun. It's because there is a deeper reason.
Yeah, I think also too, this Buffy the Vampire Slayer is a show that is entirely alone. Because I run into so many people, I do a lot of, obviously, Buffy shows, and this could easily be Willow, a show, or a Xander show, or a Spike show, or when Angel was on. There are so many characters that people have fallen in love with. Jonathan. Sure. But it's funny because I do run into a lot of people who say they don't love Buffy, but they love the show because this was something where everybody can find something of everything they love about themselves, or somebody they knew, or somebody they wish they knew in one of these characters. And I think that's just a great testament to the longevity of something. I think if it was just Buffy for 7 years, we wouldn't be talking about it for this long. But since it was so rich with characters, even the short-lived ones, like Jonathan or Tara, or, you know, any number of characters that you guys could probably say was, you can tell how much they mean to you, regardless of their length on the show.
Well, and actually, you know, to that point, in talking about characters, who's been your favorite character to write or to draw since you started working, either on the show or in the comics, or?
Well, I mean, for me, it's always whoever I'm writing at the time, but I think who has surprised me was Giles' great aunt, Sophia Lavinia. They were characters who were going to be on the River show or movie, and Josh said to me from the start, you know, you don't have to, but you're welcome to use these characters, and he told me what he had in mind for them. And I sort of dragged my feet and didn't introduce them until issue 10 because I was scared, you know, because I could watch Buffy the show and Angel the show and get an idea of who these characters were supposed to be. But if I screwed up, you know, I didn't know who these women were supposed to be, and if I screwed it up, you know, I was introducing a new Joss Whedon character that he actually came up with and totally screwing it up from the get-go. But it has become so much fun writing them because they are so self-centered, but they're not bad people, and when the chips are down, they're not afraid, and they've been around a long time, seen a lot, and they know a lot, and they really do love Giles, and they feel bad that they screwed up his life, you know. So anyway, I've had a lot of fun writing them.
This kind of surprised me for me because I didn't get to write Oz very much when the show was on because I joined in season 3 and Oz didn't stick around that much longer. But when last year I did the little story about, you know, going back and finding Oz and hanging out with Oz in Tibet,